The second step to setting up a weaving project, the first step being playing in your stash and mixing and matching your colors, is to set up the warp. Now, let me explain to you. The warp, when you're looking at a loom, is that part that's moving back and forth away from you. Those really long strands, okay? Now, remember when I was talking about why I like the harp is because it had a built-in warping board? All right, this is now where you're going to understand that. If you were to imagine making a scarf, scarves are about 70 to 72 inches long. Well, how are you going to string all the strands of yarn that you want to use in the warp? I mean, you could set up 2 chairs in your kitchen and walk back and forth or whatever it is you're going to do, but you're going to lose your mind if you try doing that. A warping board is a fantastic tool because what it allows you to do, and notice this is the back of my Kromsky harp. If I turn it over, it's the weaving part. This is why I loved it. And you get a whole lot of these little sticks that fit into peg holes all along the back of the harp. And here's what you do. You start off with a strand of, I use kitchen cotton twine because it doesn't stretch, and you cut it the length of what you want to make. In this case, I'm making a man's scarf, okay? So I measured out 72 inches of a bit of cotton yarn. You can't really see it, it's kind of gotten buried in the bottom here. And I added a foot to each end, which is going to be, you know, the part you kind of cut off at the beginning and the end of your scarf or your project. Then what you do is you take that string, you tie it to your first peg, and you play around with the placements of the pegs until the string ends pretty much at a peg, okay? And you can put a whole bunch of, if you're doing something long, you would have a whole lot of yarn going back and forth around the long part. But since my scarf's relatively short, and I'm only making one project, this is a relatively short space. So then what you do is you proceed to wrap your yarn in a pattern over and over across your warping pegs, okay? Now, remember, I am what I call a knitting weaver, okay? I'm not a hardcore weaver, I'm just there to have a good time. Having said that, I would recommend you refer to a weaving book to give you the details of exactly how to set the yarn. But this gives you an idea of what you're going to be doing, an overview. Now, here's the thing. These were the 2 yarns I decided I wanted to use, okay? I had a little tiny bit less of this one. So in my mind, that's sort of my quantifier. It's once I make the warp with this yarn, that's all the yarn I have, or it gets to be as wide as I want. Now, let me just show you. I have warped a ball of this sock yarn that I'm using as my warp. And I'm making a scarf. I can kind of guess by the time I get almost up to the top of the pegs, that's going to be about as wide as I want my scarf to end up being, okay? So then what ends up happening is I'll probably end up using 2 balls because this is 1 ball. I can kind of visualize 2 balls. It's a man's scarf. I don't want it too bulky. You know, again, I'm a knitting weaver. I'm not playing around making it perfect. I'm just going to guess. It's like felting, okay? Just enjoy it. But let me just show you in terms of warping your board. This was a project I did earlier, kind of prepping for the whole series on rigid Heddle weaving. So you can see I made a very, 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 very long warp, okay? And the reason I did that basically was I had yarn I wanted to use up, so I made the warp long and I just used up that yarn. But here's the thing. I want you to understand that you don't have to just make scarves if you're using a warping board, okay? I am going to make myself a vest. I'm going to cut this fabric in half, and then I'm going to fold 1/2, and it's essentially going to be a little, it's going to be like a little vest. I'm going to put some little tabard placards here. I'm going to sew up the sides, do a little shaping, make a little V. I'm thinking of taking a yarn and crocheting all the way around the edge, and then crocheting the front and back together in something neat, or maybe doing a idiot cord, an I cord all the way around the edge, and making I cord loops to button through. But you see, when the other thing about rigid heddle weaving, I don't want you to think, oh, I really don't need that many scarves. Okay, it's not that. You can make fabric, and then you can just go and enjoy making something you can wear. All right, I'm going to finish warping probably another ball of yarn, and then I'm going to show you how all these strands come off and you start getting ready to prep your loom for weaving.